The story starts and we see a boy. As soon as the boy turns around, his eyes widened in shock. In front of him, a small child was trying to chew on a sharp fruit-cutting knife with his mouth. Panicking, the boy immediately ran over and tried to stop the child. Then he picked him up and rushed outside to take him to the hospital. But as soon as the child reached the white line marked at the doorway, he suddenly stopped. He was scared to cross the line. Seeing the situation worsen, the boy forcefully pulled him outside. He didn't expect the child to fall to the ground and start screaming loudly, with his chest moving in a strange way. The boy had never seen anything like this before, and he was terrified. Now the story goes back a few days. The boy, Andy, and his younger sister Piper were both minors. A few days ago, their father had died in a sudden bathroom accident. Social workers found a foster family for the siblings. They were sent to live with a woman named Laura, who was a counselor. On the very first day, Laura welcomed them warmly and insisted on taking a photo together. On the surface, Laura seemed gentle and cheerful, but Andy soon realized that her behavior was a bit off. He was surprised when she introduced them to her old deceased pet dog, which was a little strange. It made Andy feel uneasy. That same day, Laura mentioned that she had a daughter who, like Piper, was blind from birth, but she had drowned in an accident. Just then, Laura received a phone call and told them to explore the house. When Andy and Piper went to the garden, they saw a small boy named Oliver standing in an empty swimming pool, holding a cat in his lap. He was clutching the cat tightly, as if he had no intention of letting it go. Soon, Laura arrived there and picked up the cat in her hands. As Oliver turned around, there was a large red mark under his eye, and his gaze remained fixed on Piper, as if he saw something special in her. Actually, Oliver was also an adopted child of Laura, but he was very strange. He never talked to anyone. Piper, who was naturally very friendly, wanted to be friends with Oliver. She asked Laura what Oliver looked like. Laura said that he had red curly hair and was a very cute child. But Andy didn't understand why Laura had lied. Maybe she wanted to create a good image of Oliver in Piper's mind. Then Laura showed the siblings their rooms. Piper was given the room that once belonged to Laura's deceased daughter, and Andy was given a small room next to it. Andy started talking to one of his friends on the phone, but he didn't know that Laura was standing outside the door, listening to everything. Andy felt uncomfortable. A little while later, when Andy ended the call and started talking to Piper, Laura suddenly picked up Andy's phone and began reading his messages. Andy didn't like this at all. He quietly began to distance himself from Laura. That night, Laura sat Oliver down alone and showed him an old videotape that featured a strange ritual. On the other hand, Andy, who was already feeling uncomfortable in this new environment, couldn't sleep. He started looking out the window. He saw Laura and Oliver heading to a storage room at midnight. Andy couldn't understand what they were doing so late at night. In the morning, when Andy woke up, he felt ashamed of himself. He couldn't understand how he had wet the bed at this age. When he went to the bathroom, he heard the sound of running water, which reminded him of the scene of his father's death. A few days later, Andy and Viper's father's funeral rites took place, but there wasn't a single tear in Andy's eyes, nor any emotion on his face. He didn't even look at his father once. Laura noticed this. After the funeral ended, Laura quietly took a lock of their father's hair and told Andy that a final goodbye should come from the heart. It is then that Viper realizes that Andy has no respect left for their father, and she becomes somewhat upset with him. Laura forcefully tells Andy to kiss his father's forehead as a final farewell, but Andy simply refuses to do so. On their way back, seeing both of them so serious, Laura says, "When someone passes away, it's important to celebrate peace after their departure. Otherwise, grief will rot away inside." After that, Laura arranges a small celebration for the three of them. Soon, Viper passes out drunk on the sofa. Under the influence of alcohol, Andy and Laura start talking more deeply and share what's in their hearts. Laura says that after losing her daughter, she died inside, and she could give up everything if someone would just call her mother once again. Andy also opens up about his past, revealing that his father used to hit him. That's why when his father died in the accident, Andy felt relieved rather than sad. Andy falls asleep. But then, Laura does something strange. She urinates in a container and pours it over Andy. When Andy wakes up in the morning, he thinks he has wet the bed again and is filled with shame. Downstairs in the washing area, Laura and Piper were doing the laundry. When Piper found out about it, she burst out laughing. Hearing this, Andy felt even more embarrassed. He quietly went to take a bath. But while bathing, he kept remembering the scene of his father's death. Disturbed by these thoughts, he went out to the garden and started bathing there instead. At that moment, he saw Oliver peeking out of a window upstairs, catching a fly and putting it straight into his mouth, chewing it. Andy was horrified. He felt something was not right with Oliver. So he went to check Oliver's room. The door was locked, so Andy forcefully opened it with a knife. He brought Oliver into the kitchen and started cutting some fruits for him. But when he turned around, he saw Oliver trying to chew on the same knife. A horrifying sight. Andy was terrified. Just then, Laura and Piper returned home. Laura scolded Andy, saying that taking Oliver outside was a big mistake. They all went back inside. Andy was still trembling because the knife was covered in blood. Laura immediately took Oliver to his room and started playing an old videotape to distract him from any outside noise. She turned the speaker volume up very high. The tape was playing a recording of some mysterious ritual. Then Laura made Oliver sit on the floor, drew some circular symbols on his forehead, and began murmuring, as if chanting some mantra. After a while, Oliver calmed down. Standing outside, Andy was thinking that Oliver should be taken to a hospital. But just then, Laura screamed, saying that entering Oliver's room or taking him out without permission was forbidden. Andy quietly backed away, but Piper was blind. Laura never suspected him. That's why he had complete freedom to come and go. Later, Laura took that lock of hair, which she had stolen from Andy's father, and placed it into Oliver's mouth. It was just like some sort of black magic. Meanwhile, Andy was still trying to recover from his fear. He had gathered the courage to go back to the bathroom to take a shower. But as soon as he entered, he began seeing horrifying visions again. He screamed, and when he regained consciousness, he found himself lying on an operating table. While lying unconscious on the operating table, Andy had a hallucination. He felt as if his father's spirit was telling him that Piper would be killed on a rainy day. Andy got extremely frightened and began trying to free himself, but a hospital doctor held him down and gave him a sedative injection. Sometime later, Laura arrived at the hospital to visit Andy. Piper had especially asked her to bring body spray for Andy so he could feel refreshed. Andy repeatedly told Laura, "Don't let Piper go out on a rainy day." Laura nodded in agreement, but as soon as they reached home, she said to Piper, "Let's have fun in the rain." When Laura looked at Piper, she was reminded of her dead daughter. She went into her room and brought out her daughter's old purple sweater and put it on Piper. Then through gestures, she asked, "How would you feel if you stayed here with me forever?" Actually, in 3 months, Andy was going to turn 18 and would legally be able to take care of Piper. Piper liked Laura, but she wanted to stay with Andy. Laura was stunned to hear this, but she forced a fake smile on her face and said, "Okay, whatever you feel is right." After that, Laura took Piper near an old freezer and told her to touch the things inside. Piper had no idea that Laura had hidden her daughter's corpse in that freezer because she was working on a plan filled with madness. A few days later, Laura brought Andy back home from the hospital. As soon as he entered, he noticed that Piper's slippers were covered in wet mud. He realized that Laura had completely ignored what he said. Now Andy began to suspect Laura even more. That same night, Laura was drawing a circle-like pattern on Oliver's head while watching a strange video. Oliver's eyes had turned red, and he looked completely lifeless. Laura kept watching that video as if she were preparing for some major ritual. After that, she took Andy's spray and sprinkled it on herself. Then she quietly went into Piper's room and punched her in the face right near her eye. The next morning, when Andy saw that Piper's eyes were red, he got very worried and asked how she was. But Piper smelled the same scent from Andy's body as the one from the spray, so she assumed that he was the one who had hit her. Laura added fuel to the fire by saying, "Your brother is becoming violent just like your father." Piper started to believe that maybe Andy was turning into his father. Then Laura also told her that Andy could no longer take Piper with him, even if he was 18 years old. She falsely accused Andy of doing drugs and said he could turn violent at any moment. Andy was silently listening to all of this. But then his eyes fell on Oliver, standing outside. He was staring blankly, unmoving, in the pouring rain. Andy tried to capture this scene on camera, but Laura snatched his phone and smashed it on the ground. In anger, Andy pushed Laura against the wall and raised his fist at her, but he didn't hit her. Still, Laura screamed as if she had been struck. Seeing this, Piper assumed that Andy had actually beaten Laura. She took Laura's side and misunderstood Andy. Deeply hurt, Andy left the house and went straight to Buddy's office. While waiting there, his eyes fell on a missing child poster on the wall. The child in the poster looked exactly like Oliver. Andy began to suspect that Laura might have kidnapped Oliver. He immediately went to meet the woman who had earlier sent him to the house. Her name was Vuddy. Andy told her everything, but Vuddy couldn't believe it. According to her, Laura was an ideal woman who took great care of children. Still, to uncover the truth, Vuddy agreed to go with Andy. Meanwhile, Laura was returning home after dropping Piper off at school. When she reached home, she found the entire house in a mess. Just then, a blood-covered Oliver came towards her and bit her hard on the arm. Screaming in pain, Laura pushed Oliver away with all her strength and ran to lock herself in her room. Outside, Oliver started gnawing at everything like a hungry beast, even chewing on the wooden table. Inside the room, Laura treated her wounds. Then she looked out the window and, to distract Oliver, started making circles on the glass. Strangely, it worked. Oliver suddenly calmed down. After that, Laura set off with Oliver toward a secret warehouse. Meanwhile, Andy and Vuddy were on their way to Laura's house. On the way, Andy called Piper to warn her, but the one who answered the phone was Laura herself. She immediately realized that Waddy was on her way, so no suspicion should arise. She quickly started cleaning the entire house and made everything look perfectly fine. When Waddy and Andy arrived at the house, Laura came to the door wrapped in a towel, as if she had just stepped out of the shower. But in reality, she was using it to hide the bloodstains on her body. Meanwhile, Andy quietly made his way toward the shed and broke the lock to get inside. What he saw there was nothing short of a nightmare. Oliver was savagely eating the corpse of Laura's dead daughter. Andy screamed loudly and called out to Waddy. As Waddy moved in that direction, Laura tried to stop her and said, "It was just an accident. Don't look." But this only made Waddy more suspicious, and she forcefully pushed Laura aside and ran toward the shed. Seeing the scene in the shed, Waddy was stunned. She immediately ran with Andy toward the car to call the police. But just then, Laura rammed the car into them at full speed, crushing both of them. Waddy died on the spot, and Andy was severely injured. Even then, Laura showed no signs of panic. She held Andy's head underwater to drown him as well. After that, Laura calmly put Piper to sleep and brought her back to the house. A little while later, Piper heard someone's voice in the house. It sounded like Andy. She followed the voice into the room, but when she reached out to feel who it wasn't Andy. Laura came in and said it was Oliver. He was just playing a prank. But Piper became suspicious because Laura had earlier said Oliver had red curly hair. But the hair she had just touched was short and straight. Piper now realized a big lie was being told. Scared, she ran into the bathroom and locked the door from inside. As she stepped back, her foot hit something soft. She reached down to touch it. It was a human body. As she felt the face, she sensed braces on the teeth. It was Andy. But just then, Laura unlocked the door with a key and entered. By now, she had already revealed her true self. Laura explained that she had made contact with an angel who promised to bring her dead daughter back to life. And now Piper would be the vessel. She said, "All that's left is to drown you. Once you die, my daughter will return to your body." Piper gathered her courage and threw a glass at Laura, then somehow managed to escape. But Piper was blind. While running, she crashed into a table and fell. Piper had fainted. After several days of heavy rain, the old swimming pool behind the house had filled up to waist level. Laura dunked Piper into the water. The suffocating water jolted Piper awake. She began thrashing and desperately pleaded with Laura to spare her life. In one final attempt to survive, Piper called Laura Mom, a word that might awaken her motherly instincts. And something like that did happen. Memories of her daughter floated in Laura's eyes. Her heart softened, and she slowly let Piper go. Piper immediately took off her sweater and began climbing out of the pool. But just then, Oliver ran after her. It was as if he didn't want to let her go. Piper couldn't see, but her courage had now doubled. She kicked Oliver hard in the stomach several times and began to run. But suddenly her foot slipped and she fell to the ground. Oliver stopped right there. His face had turned pale. Due to the injuries on his stomach, his condition started to worsen, and he coughed up blood. After that, it was as if the effect of some invisible force had broken. The fog seemed to lift from Olive's eyes. He slowly began to regain consciousness, and on his own, crossed the line he previously couldn't. By the time the police arrived, Oliver had returned completely to normal. Meanwhile, Piper, trembling badly, ran toward the road. Just then, a car saw her, and a kind man inside took her to the hospital. Laura's dream of bringing her daughter back to life had finally shattered. She hugged her daughter's lifeless body and jumped into the same pond, as if she had decided that now she would live or die only with her daughter. With this, the story ends here. Let me know your thoughts. Also subscribe to this channel for more horror stories like this.